everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today I have with me author Ben Winter. He has written a book called What to Expect When Having Expectations, and he says that most of our anger comes from expectations that are not met, and I'm anxious to hear some more about that today. But first and foremost, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Where am I speaking to you from today?
Denver, Colorado.
Denver, Colorado. Lovely place. I love Colorado. Going skiing. Skiing is one of my favorite activities. So
that's great. Yeah, mine too.
Awesome. So we're going to get into the book right away because I only have 30 minutes and I want to make sure I do that. So what to expect when you have expectations, Ben. So I want you to tell me about that. But before you tell me about that, I want you to know I have an expectation that you will give me an answer.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay. So what's the book about?
Well, it's about expectations. So obviously, I think the one thing that really comes to mind is in my improv background, I teach the tools and techniques of improv and how they kind of work for life in general. And one of them really kind of points to those expectations that we share and sometimes, I'm going to say most of the time, don't share with the people around us. And that kind of spawned that whole saying that I came up with, which is that the only reason anybody ever gets upset is because an expectation hasn't been met. And I continually play with that just to make sure that I'm correct on that. So if somebody finds a way to prove me wrong, by all means. But at the end of the day, that kind of brought up like, okay, so if we're upset and we have expectations, what can we do about it? And so it sort of formulated a flow chart that allows people to work through those upset moments. And then ultimately from there, I wrote a book about it. So it's really about taking expectations, understanding where they came from, what to do about them, and actually using moments of being upset as a growth opportunity.
Okay. So where do we have these where do they come from, expectations?
Most of our expectations definitely come from our youth, from growing up, from our parents, from our family, from our friends, school, society. And that's really where they come from. So the people you hang around with the most, they kind of form your thoughts and feelings and actions and what you see the world, like what glasses you see the world through. Okay. And so that kind of sets those expectations. So
okay. I heard you mention the flow chart, and I was on your website before we connected today, and it's something that you offer to your visitors. So could you explain some more about this flow chart? What is that for?
So the premise of it, if you go with Einstein's saying of you can't solve a problem at the same level it was created, one particular interpretation of that is you can't solve an emotional problem emotionally. You have to solve it either physically, like doing exercise, meditate, which would be considered spiritual, or solve it mentally. And the flow chart is kind of a mental process of getting out of that emotion and just looking through it as, okay, how can I get past this? And so it's a mental flow chart. Hey, I'm upset. If you can take that like moment in time when you're upset and just stop, kind of go through that flow chart, you might actually get calm really fast and realize that maybe you didn't even share your expectation to begin with.
Okay.
And it's kind of hard to get upset with somebody when you haven't even shared your expectation with them. So
Understood. Now, so are you saying that we should learn to just walk around with no expectations at all?
Oh, definitely not. That's impossible.
Okay.
One of the things that people always mention to me when I talk about expectations, they're like, I don't have expectations. That way I can't ever get upset about it. And I'm like, well, that's an expectation in itself.
That's right.
So you can't not have expectations. We go to bed at night expecting to wake up in the morning.
True.
We expect to go to the fridge and have it running, not, oh, it broke down overnight and all my food's gone. Like we have expectations on a regular basis. Most of them, they go met. There's nothing to think about it afterwards. We're never upset by them because they're pretty common expectations that should be there. So it's when they go unmet that we really understand, oh, wow, there's an expectation that's not happening the way I want it to.
Okay. So we've been spending a few minutes talking about when we have expectations. We have expectations. But I'm wondering, how do you cope or manage when you're in a situation where somebody has expectation of you and you're like, whatever. Sorry, you lose.
Yeah, no, it's a very valid question. and
Yeah.
and that's the world we live in. Everybody has expectations of everybody else,
Okay.
um, and when it comes down to relationships of any kind, business, personal, uh, random people you meet, we have expectations of other people because of our past prejudice, our programming, how we were raised.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, it comes down to communication. So if somebody puts an expectation on me that I didn't agree with, I think it's time for a conversation, maybe some
Okay.
negotiation, and say, well, that's your expectation of me. However, you haven't shared that. Let's take a step back and talk about it
Okay.
because I don't agree with that expectation. So, what can we agree on? What can we negotiate? What can we work out that's going to be beneficial for both of us?
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that you do come from an improv background.
Mhm.
So I want to just do two random skits with you, and I'm going to pretend to be angry, and you're going to talk me off the cliff. Okay, Ben? So,
Okay, I'll give it a
all right.
shot.
All right. So Ben, I'm so upset. I'm so angry, Ben. I went to the grocery store today and they had this sign at the front and it said you need a mask to get into the store. So I was doing my grocery shopping and there was these teenagers running around. They didn't have any masks so I talked to the manager and he's like, "Well, I can't do anything." Ben, I had an expectation that they would have these rules, people would follow them and they would enforce them. And I'm just upset. My health is in danger here. What are we going to do about this?
Okay, well, first of all, um, if the manager's not able to do anything, the only thing that you could have done at that point is approach the teenagers themselves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you approach them?
No, I did because teenagers they're different crew these days. Not like back when I was younger. I had respect for authority, which clearly these teenagers did not have. So, it's kind of tricky approaching teenagers these days.
Yeah, I agree. They kind of scare me myself. So, uh, I think if you're not willing to approach them and the management's not going to do their part, you kind of have to just walk the other way, don't you think?
So I'm still angry, Ben.
Yeah, but is it is it a reasonable expectation? Yes, it is because it's a mandate. So
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, it's a reasonable expectation that they're wearing a mask.
Okay.
But if they're not willing to do it themselves, if you're not willing to put forth the effort, if you're not willing to have those conversations and the management isn't either,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a whole lot you can do other than to control your own emotions at that point. And really, at that point, it's just ignore it, walk away, and go the other direction, which isn't going to solve the problem of people walking around without a mask. But what you could do is when you get home, go file a complaint with the company and say the management wouldn't do anything.
Okay. Okay. Which is usually the predicament we find ourselves in these days where we have
Yeah.
some people wearing masks and some people not. You just really have to, that's their personal choice and accept it. And I think that's where we're struggling with as a society right now with this COVID-19
Yeah. Let me kind of dive into that a little bit.
okay.
Part of the flowchart, part of working through this is coming up with reasonable expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to use traffic as my prime example because it's pretty prevalent in our lives. Is it reasonable for me to be upset about other people's driving? No, it's not because I can't control everybody else's driving. I can't even get into a conversation with everybody else on the road.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it would take me my entire life to get through all those people. And secondly, most of them won't care. And so it's completely unreasonable for me to have an expectation that they are going to follow the same rules that I grew up with. And in fact, in some other states, some other countries, they do have different rules. So it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make any sense. Um, Same thing with politics, same thing with COVID. Everybody has different views. You can't talk to everybody. And ultimately, at the end of the day, to really get past expectations, is you have to be able to share them with others, have them agree or negotiate or come up with an understanding that you both can live with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not able to do that, you really just kind of have to take that step back and say, I guess I can only look at myself and I can only manage my own expectations at this point.
Okay.
So in traffic, for that example, I just have to take a deep breath, remind myself it is stupid for me to even think that I can control this world, let alone the 5 people around me in the cars,
Mm-hmm.
especially when we're going 65 down the highway. I can't have a conversation with them right now. I don't even know who they are. So
But it almost seems like you will develop a kind of laissez-faire attitude that might be irritating to the masses. Like, whatever. And if this happens, okay. And, but sometimes we need to be proactive and have expectations and, like, I don't know. Is there a balance to this whole process?
absolutely. You have to, you can control what you can control. But if you try and control everything, you're never going to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to take it internally. So how many times would you say you have an expectation of yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say most of our
Most of the
expectations
days.
come, yeah, most of our expectations come from ourselves. Oh, I expected to go work out today. I expected to get home in 30 minutes. I
Mm-hmm.
expected this of myself. I expected to eat well today. We put our expectations on ourselves all the time. We get upset with ourselves all the time. If you can control those, take those a step back and actually have a good conversation with yourself, say, okay, well, I didn't exercise today, or I'm not in sleep yet, so maybe I just go exercise right now.
Okay.
You have those conversations, you become more at peace with yourself, and then the stuff that other people do don't bother you nearly as much. Does that mean you shouldn't share those expectations with others? No, you absolutely should if you can. So, a relationship at home, a relationship at work, absolutely share those expectations. Hey, the great example that I put in the book is, uh, hey, honey, take out the trash. Okay, there's a pretty simple expectation there. Take out the trash. But if the other person doesn't do it right away, but the expectation was that they do it right away, there starts to be that imbalance. So the
Yes.
person
Yes.
didn't actually communicate effectively,
It's
saying,
yes.
I need it taken out now because of this, and this is my reasoning. And
Mm-hmm.
do you agree with that, or do you need to finish doing what you're doing before you take out the trash? There's communication there.
Gotcha.
Trash is a simple example, but you kind of see where sometimes we leave out the important details that people need to make a decision or choice or a negotiation and an agreement at the end of it.
And you've mentioned this quite a few times. Share your expectations. Share your expectations. But I think it's sort of like a human default where we get in our own minds and think like everybody thinks like we do. So it's very hard to say I need to break this down to the minuscule to the other person so that they know what my expectations are. I'm sharing my expectations with this person, and I guess it takes a while for that to kind of click in and say I really need to talk to people, communicate with people down to the nitty gritty so that there is no confusion. Correct?
Yeah, you kind of hit it on the nose. We as a society kind of suck at communication,
Okay.
and so because we assume everybody thinks exactly like we think. So as soon as we can get past that, and this is a practice. This is not something you're going to just do overnight. It's every time this comes up,
Mm-hmm.
you have to practice it. And the trigger point, the point to practice this every single time is when you find yourself upset.
Okay.
Period. That is the best trigger point. I say get upset because that is a moment of opportunity for you to grow as a person.
Okay. Now let me ask you this: what would be your take? Because it seems like you would alleviate a lot of the anger and frustration if you set yourself in groups, tribes, communities that shared your same expectations. So family structures tend to have the same expectations. Certain social groups have the certain expectations. But is it beneficial to put yourself around people who don't have the same expectations as you?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I'm actually working on another book exactly
Okay.
around this thing.
Okay.
The premise comes down to is that nobody wants to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we live in a world today where if somebody tells you that you're wrong, you're going to fight them indefinitely to prove that you're right.
Mm-hmm.
If you figure out you're wrong on your own, you'll kind of maybe beat yourself up for 5 minutes, move on with life. And I hate to bring it back to politics, but politics is just that. You're
Mm-hmm.
wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. And here we are just battling each other. Nobody's really kind of saying, you know what, maybe you have a good point.
Yes.
Maybe I should educate myself. And by sticking with our tribes, with our groups that validate how we feel and what we think, it's much easier to survive. And that really goes back to survival instincts.
Evolutionary. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Because back in the day, if you weren't in your tribe, you weren't likely to survive because there was nobody else around.
True.
And you worked together as a tribe to find food and shelter and water. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of ingrained in us because of, thousands and thousands of years of evolution. And we still kind of like to stick into those little
Mm-hmm.
niches and groups, and it helps us validate our own feelings.
Yes. But you say, am I hearing you suggest that we should work proactively to be around people who don't have the same expectations as us?
Yes, absolutely. I did have the other side point to that. You do want to. What I've found is that the best way to get out of your own kind of comfort area is educate yourself. And it's I'm not talking like book education. I'm not talking about going to school. Obviously, that helps. It's taking a step back and learning. Um, you can watch the news for one side of the argument and get all your validation. You can watch the news of the one that kind of goes against your feelings and get really upset. Those don't necessarily provide the correct information. If you go as much to the source as possible and look at the information and kind of come up with your own conclusion, then you're much better off, and you can decide, okay, I don't really like hanging out with the people I've been hanging out with because I don't agree with them anymore.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This piece of information really came to light. And I don't agree with it. And so maybe it's time I find new friends. And sometimes we do have friends that just hold us back and they don't support us. And sometimes we do have to let go of friends that are negative and hold us back and go find a new tribe. And it's totally okay. And in today's world, it doesn't take long.
Yes, not at all. Not especially with the technology. And it reminds me of a situation I had, with this wanting to harbor to your expectations and stay in your tribe and not going out of your comfort zone. Many years ago, I had taken a little, like a girls' trip, and we went to a foreign country, and it was one of the ladies on the trip. It was her first time traveling out of the country. And it was our first evening there trying to find a restaurant for the whole crew to find something to eat. And when we get there, she's looking at the menu. She's like, there's no American food on the menu. And I was looking at her like, we've gotten on a plane, passports and all, traveled to a foreign country. Why would you expect for there to be a piece of America here? But it just really shows to you, it just speaks to you how sometimes our expectations can get so malaligned and so far-fetched, and we plant our feet deep in them and believe we are not wrong at all for feeling that way.
Absolutely. And it comes down to deciding to be aware of your own thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Okay.
And that's the path of what's called personal growth. And there's so many paths out there for it. Just you say Tony Robbins and people know personal growth. There's so many groups and people out there, and most of the personal growth that's out there, it really just starts with awareness, taking that moment in time and just stopping and saying, what's going on up here? And I just found a really great trigger. Hey, I'm upset. What can I do about it?
Okay.
And that's where I came up with the expectation piece.
Okay. And I had said we had two skits. I only did one. I got one more skit. Let me
go
ahead and do this other one real here. So, Ben, I am so upset. I am so angry. I have been dating this guy for 6 months. I gave him my all. I was there. I was the best girlfriend I could possibly be. And Ben, I found out the other day he's dating two or three other women. Like, why would he do that? I didn't expect that. Ben, what? I'm mad.
I can understand. Most people expect a monogamous relationship, especially after 6 months.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of the societal norm.
Why should I even have to communicate that? Why should I have to share my expectations?
Because not everybody feels the same way. Um, you know, it is funny, but it's also true.
Yes.
I know people they just want to date. They don't
Uh-huh.
want monogamy. They don't even want a
Yeah.
serious relationship. And man, oh man, do we need to do this more in relationships? We
Mm-hmm.
need to communicate. And apparently, based on his actions, he wants to be dating multiple people. And if that's not okay with you, you're going to have to tell him, bye.
It's so tricky because I do a lot of relationship counseling, but it's tricky because sometimes one of the partner, him or her, I'm not going to put it on any gender, but they will know that it is expected of them to be monogamous, but they want to hold on to this person, so they don't really divulge all the details. So, they know the expectations, but they don't want to properly fulfill the expectations. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that might be another area too. Sometimes we know what's expected of us. The expectations have been shared, but oh well, I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah. And the part of that whole flowchart that really kind of is hard for people is that communication piece.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you share your true nature, your true expectations, your true feelings on the subject of, I want to date multiple people, you might lose the person you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and that's why we stop ourselves, is the fear. A lot of times we don't talk to people about our expectations because we fear, or we have an expectation of how they're going to react.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that expectation is that creates fear. So we just have to either do it and accept the results, or kind of live in that limbo space, which is not fun.
Not at all. I
Yeah.
mean, I have been in too many conversations, too many coffee shop conversations where, he or she is just really upset and I have given my all and, but no parameters, no expectations. Or like I was saying earlier, they have been given, but people just don't want to be authentic and true. And, look, this is me. This is me. Um, so the anger part. Let me get on the anger part. And I'm thinking about. I have a relative. I don't want to mention who she
Don't
is.
give it away. Don't give it away. You already said too much.
She's a little OCD. She's a little OCD, and everything has its spot. Everything has its place, and we all know this. We all know this. But some of the younger generation of us, we love to mess with her. So, when we're visiting her at her house, we know I'm 51 years old. So I've been with this woman for 51 years now. We know this goes here, this goes here, this goes. But when all the cousins get together, a little mischief. So we know what her triggers are. So we misplace things. Don't put this back here. She's finished washing dishes. We'll come and put one in after she's finished or whatever. And and we're all like, it never fails. Calm down. It's okay. It will work out, but it doesn't seem like she's going to let go. I mean, how, we just want her to loosen up. Like it's really trivial. I mean, some of these things that we get angry about, these expectations that we have, are really so minor and so inconsequential in the total picture of life. It seems like we would just be like, that really wasn't worth it. Why do we hold on to these things? So, I mean, we clutch them so dearly to ourselves.
Yeah, and it goes back to our programming when we were kids, and
Mhm.
whatever reason, that's her way of controlling things.
Okay.
And if she wants to get past it, then she just has to practice those little
Mhm.
things. If she doesn't want to get past it, then you guys just have to have the fun that you have knowing that she's going to get upset about it. And
Ah,
yeah, you can have the conversation of, why we're doing this to you,
yes,
so you can
yes,
have some
indeed.
fun, right? But
Uh,
if she doesn't want to have the fun, then either
we
stop.
Yeah, we terrorize her throughout the whole
Yeah.
house. It's a whole day of just
Hopefully she sees it in good fun at the end of the day, but
shh,
yeah.
shh, shh. We're all sitting, but anyway. Okay.
Uh,
So, um, what types of expectations are good to have?
that's a good question. I've never actually had that one asked. I don't know that there are any bad expectations. I
Hmm.
I kind of feel like they're either reasonable or unreasonable.
Okay.
And so if they're unreasonable, it's not necessarily a bad expectation. It's just misaligned with the situation,
Okay.
in which case it's an opportunity again to think differently, come up with a different answer, different solution,
Okay.
and kind of go from there. Because we have good expectations. I expect to go to bed at night and wake up in the morning. I expect there to be food in the fridge.
Hmm.
Like, these are not bad expectations. It's that when we get upset by an expectation, that we really kind of have to take that step back and kind of go through things and figure out, where did it go wrong.
Okay.
And a lot of the times it's that we didn't even know we had the expectation in the first place, which
Okay.
is awesome, because then you'd be like, oh, why do I have that expectation? Where did it come from? Maybe that's just my mom talking,
Mm.
you know?
I'm thinking so. If I go to the doctor for surgery, I'm
Mhm.
expecting them to be qualified and perform their job well. But what happens when if they screw it up?
Well, there's a big problem in say America, which is malpractice suits, right?
Yes.
Unfortunately, it should be like mal result,
Ah.
because we have an expectation that it's going to work, that we're going
Mhm.
to get the result we want, and when things don't go how we want, we get upset by it. Um, Things happen. I mean, surgeons are people too. People make mistakes, and sometimes they say they can fix something and then they can't for whatever reason. And so we get really upset by that. But we have to remind ourselves is, we didn't get the result we wanted, but did they do their job correctly? And I think
Okay.
that's the big difference, because if they did their job correctly and it still came up with a result you didn't like, well, that's just kind of how it went. Now, if they didn't do their job correctly, by all means, that's a problem.
Okay.
And then the question becomes, can it be fixed, and can somebody else fix it? Um, and how do we go from there? So it's just kind of, it comes back to asking questions, talking, communicating, really kind of getting to the points of true understanding and agreement.
Okay. Okay. Now, before I get to my random question, I'm going to be a little nosy, Ben, because you've written this book. I'm assuming with some personal history. So, looking at yourself today, Ben today, and your personal growth and evolution, um, what expectations that you've had that you've resolved or come to terms with in the course of your life?
Oh, one of the biggest ones is text messages. um, so for many, many years with text messages, people have their phone with them all the time. I had the expectation of pretty fast responses, and let's just say in the dating world, that's not always the case. And so what do we like to do when somebody's not responding? We like to come up with every reason why.
Yeah. Hmm.
And every minute that goes by, every hour that goes by, those reasons get ridiculous. And
You're calling all the hospitals and you're okay.
like, what did I do wrong, and when did I
Yes.
do it wrong?
Yes.
Yeah. So I ultimately kind of screwed up a relationship because of
Oh.
those expectations. And that was kind of a big turning point for me because I realized the error of my ways. And so if somebody doesn't text back, I just ignore the fact that I even sent a text in the first place.
Life goes on.
Life goes on. And if, eventually they do, and I can say with certainty, 100% certainty, that I've never, ever been right about any reason I've ever come up with on why somebody hasn't texted back. And I've come up with thousands.
Oh, I can imagine. I can only imagine. The mind is the most devious creature. It can go in the most dangerous places sometimes.
Exactly. So for all the listeners out there, they're not texting back for a reason that you have no idea about. Just
That's
wait.
right. That's right. All righty, Ben. We're going to do the random question, and then I want you to tell everybody how they get the flow chart, the how to
Okay.
stop being upset, how do they get the book, and how they connect with you and all of that stuff. So let's do the random question here. Let's see what we've got here.
All right.
What's one item on your bucket list?
Going to New Zealand, actually. It was on my list.
Awesome place, awesome, beautiful place, beautiful, great. So tell everybody how they get the flow chart, how they get the book, how they connect with you, so they can stop having expectations that get them so upset and out of shape and mess up their whole day.
Absolutely. The easiest, going to the website, havingexpectations.com. So havingexpectations.com, you've got the flowchart that you can get for free. I kind of get your email address, but I don't spam anyone. And there's links to Amazon to buy the book, and you can at some point see this interview on there.
Awesome. Well, Ben, I expected this to be a wonderful 30 minutes of passing my day today, and it has proved to fruition and proved to be right and correct. So thank you for your time. I enjoyed myself today.
Thank you. I did too.
Awesome. So everybody, make sure you go pick up the flowchart, visit his website, and be careful with those expectations. This is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.